This is the heartfelt cry of a murderer's mother.
全天下没有一个爸爸妈妈要花一个20年去养一个杀人犯。
2 years ago, her son David carried out an indiscriminate killing in a cinema. He had no motive, no specific target. When it happened, a total of 9 dead and 21 injured. The next day, David's parents' address was unearthed by the media. The front door of the formerly Happy Little Noodle shop was spray-painted with all sorts of nasty words. They received calls every day. They huddled in the corner in the middle of the night, frightened by the sound of people breaking into their shop to protect their daughter Wendy, who had just graduated from university. The parents decided to change her name and instructed her that if Then she moved to the countryside alone and went into hiding. 2 years passed. After changing her name, Wendy became an employee of a television station. Just as she was getting her life back on track, she was devastated by the news that her brother was about to be executed. And just an hour before the news was released, Jack, the lawyer defending David, had managed to convince him that he would meet with his family. The parents were overjoyed to receive the news. As they debated whether to bring beef or hen for their son, David had been sentenced to death. The two men nearly fainted as they wept at the news. On the other side, Wendy, who was connected to the scene, hearing the sound of gunshots on the phone, she couldn't stop the tears from flowing out of her eyes. At this point, she didn't realize she was being watched. Meanwhile, Kevin's lawyer, who had failed to prevent the shooting, looked at the badge on the courtroom wall. He left with disappointment in his eyes. Late at night, a drunken lawyer Kevin returns home. He asks his wife in disbelief. That was the reason for his disappointment. He knew in his heart that David deserved to die, but he was David's defense lawyer. He didn't get the notice of execution. Instead, the media got it. He was going crazy with accusations.
为什么不让他跟他的家人见最后一面？不懂，这合法吗？合理吗？合情吗？
And his parents-in-law don't listen to a word of it. They just sneered at him for defending such a man. It's ridiculous. And such a viewpoint led to an even bigger whirlwind of fate. The big scoop: to be or not to be? The sister of the murderer who killed her son is actually beside himself?
我哥是杀了很多人，那我跟我家人连活下去的权利都没有吗？
Anna asked her angrily.
我儿子有活下去的权利吗？
The mother left her children watching a movie to take a phone call outside. As she sat outside to finish her cup of coffee and go back in, several police cars appeared in front of her. She rushed into the theater like a madman. All she got was the news that her son had been murdered. After that, she numbed herself with alcohol every day. She hated herself for drinking that cup of coffee. Because of this guilt, she couldn't even go into her son's room. The death of her son had made her daughter unbalanced too. That day the girl asked her aunt this.
为什么可以看个电影就不见了？
A family that had been so happy was shattered. 2 years later, David was executed by firing squad. She remembered that day again. She looked at the picture of the 4 of them and hid in the stairway, crying. She accidentally saw a renamed Wendy on the phone to her parents. She immediately called her subordinate. She told him to keep an eye on Wendy. On the day that Wendy Lee's family claimed the body, Anna arranged for a reporter to follow them all the way. Even their home address was revealed. The publicity was overwhelming. Wendy rushed to the office to ask Anna why she was doing this.
我哥是杀了很多人，那我跟我家人连活下去的权利都没有吗？
Anna angrily asked her in return.
我儿子有活下去的权利吗？
There was no right or wrong. That was the end of the argument. But it wasn't over yet. That day, Wendy's parents came to the office. It turns out that after the argument ended that day, Wendy had disappeared. Her parents were worried about her safety, but this action made Anna lose her mind.
知道他在哪里？
The parents got down on their knees and begged for forgiveness. But in return, Anna went on a hysterical rant. When an older man saw them, he apologized to Wendy's parents because he had sent them here. He wanted to try and make things easier for Anna. A few hours later, the parents found Wendy with the help of Kevin's lawyer. Wendy looked at her mother's mask-covered face with skin disease. She decided to try to cope with it all. That day, Anna, accompanied by her husband, she came to the theater where she had been 2 years ago. The past was still fresh in her mind. She cried and blamed herself.
我怎么可以让你也一个人自
In fact, she knew in her heart David's family is not to blame for this, but that's why she couldn't accept that her son was in danger and she wasn't there for him. That's all. When both families realized that things needed to be faced, lawyer Kevin, who was the link, opted out. The man who was outraged is a lawyer who specializes in defending death row inmates. This time he was defending an indiscriminate murderer, so he was retaliated against by the victim's family. The video went viral. People were saying things like "good job." Even Kevin's wife couldn't understand why her husband was on death row. Here's what the defense lawyer said to her.
我差点杀人，你处他父子，我没有做上要求火并的遗憾。然后我在幼儿园最亲的两个哥哥，一个死，一个无期徒刑。不是每个人生下来都可以选。他的确犯下了难以原谅的罪，我会说他是个罪人，可是他不一定是个坏人。
He was convinced he was doing the right thing, but reality hit him hard. Lawyer Kevin received many threatening letters every day, including his wife, but his wife chose to keep it to herself. She didn't want him to worry about it. On her way home from taking her daughter to school that day, she ran into a psychopath. She fell down to avoid him. The baby she was about to have was born prematurely. The situation was very dangerous. Because of this incident, the father-in-law spoke to the lawyer. He told the lawyer everything that had happened in the last few days.
有人传简讯恐吓妹妹，可是妹妹怕你有压力，不敢告诉你。你知不知道你现银行还剩多少钱呢？
The lawyer was deep in thought. A few days later, the news of his child's failed rescue reached him. He blamed himself. At this moment he was no longer the righteous lawyer defending a man. He was a father who had watched his child die. After that he changed. He started defending rich people. All he wanted was a well-paying lawsuit. That day David's parents came to see him. They wanted Kevin's help in setting the record straight for the public, but the lawyer turned them away. All this was seen by his wife. She watched her husband smile at the fat man in front of her for money. She became afraid. Late that night, the wife woke up and saw her husband smoking outside. She decided to have a chat with him. She wanted her husband to be like his old self again.
好想念那个充满温度的老公，那个眼神里面闪着光芒，充满正义感的老公。
The husband who cried and apologized and said, "I'm here." That night he found David's parents. He couldn't stop the smile on his lips. It was like the dawn of darkness. A few days later, the story of what David's family had suffered for 2 years was broadcast on television. And because of that, the families of the victims began to live a normal life. 3 years later, David's parents began to help those who were injured as a result of that incident. Some of them he never wanted to be bad, but somehow he became the evil that people think he is. To quote a line from the play,
我们都是好人，不知道为什么事情会变成这个样子。老天爷到底要我们学什么？